welcome everybody to Legends and Lectures. Danny and I have been going on for a while about all things linguistics and language, as would happen on this program. But Danny, for those who don't know you, Dr. Danny Bate, would you please tell people who you are and what you do?
Yes, with great pleasure. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I think I should say that I am Dr. Danny Bate, and I currently have a mouthful of cake, so it may be affecting my voice a little bit.
As is
So
tradition.
yeah, as is only right. So please call me Danny. The doctor bit isn't necessary unless I'm showing off for some reason. But I like to call myself a linguist and writer. So I studied linguistics for 8 very happy years, from BA all the way through to PhD. And because academia is generally on fire, I now find myself outside the loving embrace of universities. And I've pivoted to basically talking about linguistics full time, and hopefully, when I'm organized, trying to get paid for it as well. And this has most recently manifested itself in YQ Needs You, my first book, which is a bit of a hit, at least in the UK. It's sort of taken people, it's taken everybody involved a little bit by surprise by the reaction to this book. Everybody apart from my agent, my literary agent, who was never in any doubt. So that's me. I am a public linguist and writer.
And we are going to talk about Why Q Needs You because the book is absolutely smashing. But in general, as I think people might be wondering, is why the obsession with the alphabet in the specific instance? Why the alphabet?
Yeah, it has developed into an obsession, but I would say that to begin with, the choice of topic was actually more of a means to an end. I love it, and I feel so grateful to have just by sort of the accidents of history have taken me into this incredible topic, and I've also been made very welcome by scholars who study writing and the alphabet more specifically. So it's great that I've now belong to this, or I like to think I belong to this community. But to start off with, it was very much about I want to write a book. What is it going to be about? What will grab people off the shelves? Because my PhD, for example, is actually in syntax. It's in the study of word order, historical word order, which meant that I'm very comfortable talking about the history of languages. But I think it's interesting. I just will also recognize and bow to the advice of the experts that it's not a particularly sexy topic and it's not going to grab people
Oh,
off the
syntax is
shelves of your.
extremely sexy.
I
Ask any English person who is trying to learn Japanese. Very sexy.
mhm. Yes, that's absolutely the word that will spring to mind when you're trying to master Japanese word order from the perspective of English. Yes, as sex, I'm having a very sexy time right now. Um, but I get it. So it was very much about looking for something that would grab people, and I hit upon the alphabet quite quickly because I felt like it occupied a perfect middle ground. In that, people have opinions about it. That's good. Conscious awareness and an idea of it as a thing that I can work with and respond to. I don't need to introduce the subject as a whole. People have memories of learning the alphabet as well, unlike say speech. If you speak, speech tends to be learned at a pre-memory stage of development. So there's groundwork of there's sort of an established awareness of the alphabet, but also it fits so unobtrusively into our daily lives that it's also something that people might like to know more about. Actually, to spend time with the alphabet, they will enjoy the process of finding out more, seeing the alphabet that they use so often in a new light. So with that in mind, it's everything else followed from there.
So why is the alphabet in that order? So in your book, the first question you ask is why does A come first? But why is the alphabet in this specific order?
Yeah, haha, so great right off the bat to be confronted by the question that I fear and love the most. We don't really know.
Yeah.
Isn't that
I love
interesting?
that answer. I love that
Yeah,
answer. We don't know.
we don't
Whatever.
straight off the bat. And do you know what? I think that's nice as well. I don't mind answering questions by saying we don't know because I think it instantly offers a bit of intrigue, a sense of the field being in flux, being in development. So the people who study the history of the alphabet will tell you that we are basically cobbling together our theories from a limited pool of ancient archaeological evidence, most of which does not display the alphabet's order. It seems odd to say that. You think, of course, we should have evidence for it, but think about it. How often since childhood have you written out the full alphabet? Then take those objects. How many of them are written on perishable materials that will survive 4,000 years? Not many. So quite quickly, we are into the weeds. We're appreciating that we are trying to answer these very valid, very obvious questions. Say, why is the alphabet ordered that way? With very limited evidence. A lot of it involves inference, indirect evidence, as well as direct evidence. Basically, you could work through what isn't the reason. So if by looking at other scripts and writing systems that are around today. So take say Devanagari used in India. That's the one with the line that goes across the top, right, and they
Hmm.
sort of hang down underneath. Devanagari is organized according to phonetics. You write out all the letters according to what kind of sound they represent. So vowels come first, and I think it ends with like sibilants and the h sound, right? Makes sense. That's not the alphabet. The alphabet, as much as we can tell from the earlier stage, is not organized on a phonetic basis. The letters and the sounds we're pretty sure they represented, there's no consistency. Okay, then look at say the dominant order for the Arabic script. The Arabic script has one or two traditional ways of writing it out in full, but the one that you'll learn in a lesson today, I think it's called something like the Tawiya order. I might be wrong about that. It basically it's organized according to similarity of shape. So you group the letters together according to whether they share the kind of fundamental base, and they differ according to how many dots and where you put the dots. Also, not the case. So we look at the earliest forms of the alphabet when our letters still look like things. They look like they're sort of the hieroglyphs that inspired them. Again, there's no visual coherence. What does that leave us with? Probably a mnemonic. It's
Hmm.
probably a mnemonic where, in the same way, like in Western music, you have the notes of the treble clef, the ones on the bars, like "Every good boy deserves
Hmm.
favor" or "Football," whatever you learned. Like it's something like that, where the letters are organized in a way that maybe was connected to a phrase that the learners, the early students, would then remember. What that phrase was, lost to history.
Maybe. I mean, if we think about it now, we have our alphabet songs. We have A, B,
Hmm.
C, D, and or Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet. Every language has an alphabet song, and if you think
Hmm.
about it, you go, yeah, okay. I mean, that actually does make more sense than having some other kind of order, because as you say, vowels in different language, vowels are represented differently, consonants are represented differently, even if they use the same writing system. Which order are we going in, etc. So we really don't know. Can you talk about a bit
Yeah.
of the construction? Because you mentioned a little bit about visual representation. Can you talk a little bit about the construction of the letter B, the letter B, the letter B,
The
the construction of the letter B?
the, the letter B.
I
Yeah,
think
I
you
mean
can tell which one
it's
of
a
us grew up with
house to
Sesame
begin
Street and
with,
which
a
one
sort of
did not.
crudely drawn house. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting because
that Sesame Street really, yeah, it really wasn't a thing in the UK. I'll just say that when I was growing
no,
up.
you had Mr. Blobby,
Mm.
unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, that is misfortunate.
The Phoenician BT, which is obviously the Semitic for house, as you say, with Bate, which is it still is in
Hmm.
Hebrew, and Bayit, which again it still is in Hebrew. And
Yep.
I think it's interesting that because as somebody who did study ancient Hebrew when I was younger, it's interesting to see how much of that is actually in our alphabet, which I
Mm.
think is quite interesting. And how much you talk about like the Nun, Nachash, the snake, still there,
Hmm. Yep.
Mem, Mayim, the water, still there.
Yep.
It's very
Still there.
interesting to see how a lot of our ideas about visual representation have not really gone away that much. But
No.
if we do get a lot of our letters from either Semitic languages or Phoenicians, why
Mm.
did the direction of reading change?
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, the direction of writing is in flux. So it's not a given to begin with. There is no particular there's no one inevitable direction of writing that people seized on from the get go. Our earliest sources, they generally are, let's say, horizontal. So they're linear strings of letters. They are horizontal, I guess, with respect to the ground and to the person, but you do, quite quickly we are unraveling a lot of things. I mean, so what does it mean to be horizontal? That's a separate issue. um and then, but we do have some that do are vertical, but horizontal wins out quite quickly, but there is variation from right to left or left to right. Nonetheless, by the time that the alphabet, for context, the alphabet's ultimate kind of birthday is probably around the year 1900 BC, in ancient Egypt, and from that early point in time and in geography, it makes its way up the coast of the Mediterranean in a sort of anti-clockwise motion. And absolutely, as you say, the big moment, the sort of the really big nexus point that is the ancestor of most, not all, but most of the family tree of scripts that that emerge. Are the Phoenicians, the Phoenician version of the alphabet, and the Phoenicians, at least in their standardized version of the letters, by this point they really do look like letters. They're abstract by this time. They have settled on right to left, as indeed Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac are still written in to this day. The scripts, that's how they're written from that direction. So we can talk about a switch because the alphabet lands then in Greece. The Greeks acquire the alphabet from the Phoenicians, and barring variation, we do have Greek that's written right to left. We do have Greek that's also written boustrophedon, where it's snaking its way, drops down, snaking, drops down, that sort of thing. Drops down immediately. Why not? Especially if you're following the words with your finger, that makes sense. But they do settle on left to right, which is the direction that the English version of the alphabet continues to use to this day. So we are very much descendants of that switch. Why? I've seen a few explanations. One that we can dismiss is handedness, left or right-handed.
Yeah,
It is
that's
true that instantly, because it's not immediately obvious. It could seem at least briefly plausible because basically, where am I going? Certain directions of writing suit certain handedness. So I think if you are right-handed, is it more comfortable to write from left to right. The problem is not that connection between comfort in writing and handedness. The problem is that we have no reason to believe that the Phoenicians and Semitic speakers in general are dominantly left-handed.
yes.
There's no evidence for that. So there's absolutely no reason to presume that the Phoenicians were also dominantly right-handed. They passed it on to the Greeks, who were also dominantly right-handed. Doesn't explain the switch. The best theory that I've come across actually involves psychology. That because the Greeks are the first people to add vowel letters into the system, prior to this it's all consonantal.
Hmm.
Maybe the change to vowel letters, the addition of vowel letters, that's alpha, epsilon, iota, omicron, and upsilon to begin with. They're not called upsilon and omicron to begin with, but probably the addition of these letters changed the nature of reading. So basically, by this, you are no longer inferring uh, vowel sounds from the word. You're not taking the consonants and matching them up to some sort of vocalically full word in your memory. You are now reading strings, complete strings of sounds, consonants and vowels. And maybe this and the transmission of that information to the right parts of the brain meant that very completely, unconsciously, the Greeks preferred left to right. Fascinating theory, involves a lot of steps, a lot of educated guesswork, but I think it's the best theory we've got for why the script gets flipped.
Why is it that C? Because I'm thinking of questions through the alphabet, and I do have so many
Okay,
of them.
I like it.
So why is it that C has so many sound differentiations? It goes from a g to a k to a j to a th in Spanish
Hmm.
to the s. Why does C has so many different sound differentiations?
Hmm. That's a really good one, and that's the ultimate answer at the heart of that is time. Is that these letters exist through time, and the uses will multiply as time passes and the number of users multiply, so too will the usages as well. That's very kind of lofty, a bit wishy-washy for an answer. So more specifically, when the alphabet gets up and running, there's a really good ratio of sound to symbol. Why would there not be? You set up this system, you have complete free hand to make sure that every phoneme, specifically consonant phoneme of your Semitic language, has its own letter. This absolutely continues through into the Greeks. It absolutely continues through into Italy. The Greeks passed the alphabet on to the peoples of Iron Age Italy, among them Romans, Romans pre-Rome, and it's great. It works really well. Yes, okay, there are some changes. So it's the Etruscans that take the letter gamma, and because of the nature of their spoken language, they reassign it from a g, a voiced g, to a voiceless k, and the Romans adopt the letter C with that sound value. Nonetheless, if we wind the alphabet back to, say, the year 1 AD or BC, doesn't matter, there's a really good ratio still in ancient Rome of sound to symbol. Problem is, speech keeps changing.
Hmm.
And that specific sound that it stands for, the k, voiceless vela k sound, this is destined in everyday Latin to split. And this is a problem. This is a very, very natural sound change, happens thousands of years, countless times over the history of human language, where it's not a sound is changing across the board, where all instances of, say, k become ch. That's possible, could happen. I think that's happened in Hebrew. I know there is k sound as well, but
Now
I
that
think
there's a chet and then there's a kuf. Yeah. So
yeah,
there's
I think it's just I forget my Hebrew, but you've got like sounds that enter via loan words. You could have loan phonemes, so like you can have ch. Like take for example words in Irish that have a p tend to
hmm
be
yes.
like they tend to be loan words. And I think
Yeah,
there's
like
something happened in
Patrick.
Hebrew
Yeah.
like Patrick. There you go, Saint Patrick, because he came from elsewhere. He's not Irish. But I think I don't want to get my Hebrew wrong, but you've got Bate, which is standing for ver, and then you have also words with bur, and I think the words with
Oh
bur
yes,
are
I
loan
see. I see what
words.
you mean. Yes, because
Yeah, that's what I'm
you
getting
can
at.
have
Yeah.
a b and a v, but then a vav
Hmm.
is also a v. But yes, I understand. Yes, the loan words are written with the vav. Yes.
Right. So you can have this kind of sound change across the board, as has happened in languages. I'm currently struggling for an example, but the thing that really stretches the alphabet's capabilities is when you have a context dependent sound change, and this is what happened to the letter C. That the letter C, standing for k, as it still does in words like control and cavalier, both of which come from Latin, ultimately, um, it doesn't change. So before certain vowels, it does not change. These are the vowels a and o, u. But before the front vowels, e and I, it does change. It's a sound change called palatalization.
Mhm.
So consequently, this is where this change to the sound of C will affect the letter C itself, even though it hasn't visibly changed, because it's now very much based on context. What letter comes next will tell you how to read a C. This is where we get the difference between soft and hard C from. It's an imported practice into English, and it's the reason why you might say, I don't know, control but cent, like the money, that sort of thing. And context dependent sound changes are always going to stretch the capabilities of a particular letter, because now it's relying on teaching and memory and context to know, how do I pronounce this particular letter. And this is responsible for the splits over and over again. There's a split that happens in what becomes French. That's where we get soft and hard C from. The same kind of split happens in Italian with slightly different outcomes. So it's not a s but a ch, that's a soft C. And English happens to get words from Italian, like,
hmm
say, cappuccino, that has the Italian soft C. So again, by borrowing words from Italian, we are multiplying the possible values that a letter C can have. So that's a lot of information, but it's basically, at the heart of it is time and sound change, and specifically not sound changes across the board, but sound changes only in some cases. Case. That's a good word. That's a good example. That's the kind of word I was wanting. Case, from Latin casus, right?
But
It's a,
then
it's
if
it's
you
a hard
add
C.
if you
Yeah.
add your friend H right after it, it becomes Chase.
It becomes a chase. Yes, indeed. That's something else. I mean, it's not also something else. That's also sort of post-Roman linguistic shenanigans. Yeah, you encounter the same characters over and over again in the history of spelling.
Yeah, you see the H, you go, "Hey, wait a minute, it's you." Or
Yeah,
even,
yeah,
yeah,
it's the
since you know Old Irish and since you understand Modern Irish, you look at the H and how that affects consonants in
mm,
Modern Irish, and you go, "It's you again. Hey, what are
mhm.
you doing?"
Huh. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I didn't actually have much time to go into in the book, for reasons of space. But we have we have the letter H. I know I'm jumping ahead in the alphabet, but it's the combiner, right? It's the one that we combine with other letters to spell more consonant sounds. C plus H, you get ch. But we have this is kind of taken up a notch in the post-Roman world as Rome disintegrates, and we have things like th for spelling th. Yes, that is very much something that's happening in Greek, but I found while researching this, it's not particularly clear who we can point the finger of blame or finger of recognition at as to who invents and sets up certain digraphs like th,
Mm.
because certain languages absolutely need them, but it's not quite clear who got there first and who kind of spread it around first. It could have been the Irish. It could have been the Irish who actually recognized that we need th, and we need th to represent a th sound that's very much bound up in our Irish system of grammar, where we can see that a t for t is becoming a th for th through Celtic mutations. So they are maybe the people who recognize the relationship between those two sounds should be mirrored in the relationship between t and th. And maybe were the first people to partner up these letters, and then they spread it to the continent and they spread it to Britain. Maybe. I don't think it was the Greeks in this particular case, because the Greeks had the letter theta. They wouldn't. There's too many steps
Hmm.
involved in that. I think I've also read a paper that makes the case it could have been German writers instead. It could have been German writers who combined th for spelling Germanic names. It's not particularly clear. Very often there are, as far as I understand the field, there are steps in the history of spelling that are not particularly sewn up, or we're not particularly confident of.
So on this channel, we like to destroy myths and legends. So let's talk about the legend of G. Can we trust Plutarch? Because I don't. And
Well,
did Ruga really invent the G?
he could have. That's all I will say. I don't think I enjoy historical revisionism. I love people knocking down old ideas, and I also love it when old ideas then come back into fashion. So I'm instantly not skeptical of these kind of legends. I think and I'm not going to just automatically dismiss it. Yes, there could have been one individual, a freedman, so a former slave, working as a teacher in ancient Rome, who could have invented the letter G. Maybe we can call that the a minimalist, explanation. A maximalist one may be that gives him less of a founding father vibe, is he could have popularized it. He could have popularized it. He had a school. We are pretty sure, at least, that he is the first person. He's credited with being the first person to set up a school in ancient Rome. He's living around about the year 200 BC. Um, and it's really not impossible that he could have invented the letter G, prior to which, because, as I mentioned earlier, the Etruscans had allocated gamma to the C sound, the K sound, rather than G, there's no letter for G anymore. And because Latin needs that, it needs, it has a sound like G, which is in want of a letter, it would have been a very natural thing to simply add an upward stroke to a capital letter C. Very natural thing he could have done it. It would have been like adding a diacritic,
Hmm.
that we do to create new letters, just adding a simple thing. It's just a shame, of course, that only one source, written centuries after the fact, tells us this, and that's just a shame. But it's not impossible.
I appreciate your enthusiasm. So,
Hmm.
so speaking of G's, how is it that the diagraph GH came to represent so many sounds or absence of sounds?
Mm, sorry, cake.
Exactly so. And so the people had too
Hmm.
much cake in their mouths, and so eventually just became nothing because there was cake
Exactly.
involved.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay, let's move on. Uh,
Next.
next question. GH is it belongs to the same kind of phenomenon as we see with CH and TH and SH. It's basically the idea that you add H to get some other sound. It's creating digraphs. Um, this is something that's actually not present in Old English, the oldest stage of the language, pre, let's say, 1100. It's something that seems to come in from the continent with the Normans. Other languages do use CH,
Mm.
but it varies. I think there's much more. Did I say CH? I meant GH.
GH.
There's much more GH in the past, actually, uh, compared to today. Like you find more languages, using GH, like Dutch and German. It's a possible way of writing. But basically, it's brought into English to spell one or two fricative sounds like a G with the back of the mouth and the back of the tongue. This primarily would have been the sound ch, probably voiceless, possibly voiced. Voicing is, the buzzing in the larynx.
Hmm.
But this sound in certain environments could have had a more frontward, position fricative, like h, as in German ich. Right, that's a palatal fricative. And this worked. This worked really well in English. GH is one of the ways that you could spell this sound, and it actually ends up being what people settle on towards the end of the medieval period, where we find the settling of English spelling by means of a kind of standard, a London standard emerging, and that gets spread around with the printing press. But crucially, this is the thing, things like GH make the cut. They're around in speech at that time and probably for a couple more centuries, and therefore they make it into spelling, but then they disappear from the spoken language. And I think, I forget my chronology, this is where spelling mistakes are super important because we can actually tell what's going on, how people are starting to pronounce things. Which, of course, for linguistic evidence from our modern age, we won't have because everything's so standardized. Basically, from let's say the 17th century onwards, the h and h sounds start to disappear. They are being dropped from spoken words. So a word like night, as in nighttime, over the course of the modern era, goes from something like nicht to neat, with the consonant dropped, and the great vowel shift then shifts that vowel into night, and we end up in my current pronunciation. The dropping is probably starting in the late Middle Ages in time to be affected by the Great Vowel Shift. So that's basically what's going on. It sounds dropping out, but nonetheless they stuck around long enough to make it into spelling. But this is the thing. This is one of the many ways in which studying spelling absolutely ties your head up in knots, because uh, the GH still deserves to be there. It's
Hmm.
not redundant. If you take it out from words like night, you get knit. Or if you take it out from, I don't know, a word like, what's another one? Ought, you get out.
Out. Yeah.
So, out, yeah. So it still deserves to be there. And the fact that it deserves to be there is a fascinating phenomenon of a kind of parallel development. So when sounds change, if they change consistently, spelling can stand still and just represent the new sound. This can involve just a single letter when we have sound change across the board. So a good example of that would be like the letter beta in Greek. It goes from a b to a v. The letter doesn't need to change. Now it just represents the new sound. But that can also happen when vowels and consonants are working in tandem and they are changing together, as I illustrated with the example of night. They're very much bound up in each other. The consonant drops out, but this means that the vowel is lengthened. That's not happening without that consonant first dropping out, which means that basically the I and GH and spelling are all kind of in it together.
Hmm.
They're all
Yeah.
in it together, meaning that they are all bound up in each other to this day. You can't get rid of one without losing something, because the word night only has the vowel I because of the GH.
Yeah.
It's,
Exactly.
it's a strange kind of complicated relationship, which when you look at this, when you bear this in mind, English spelling becomes a lot friendlier. But we are looking at combinations of letters that work together to spell either combinations of sounds or one sounds that have since merged or affected one another. So it's a very complicated kind of dance between speech and spelling, which we all kind of
Agree on.
subconsciously
Yeah.
know, yeah, agree on and learn. We really know it. You can just make up words that involve these principles, and people will predictably pronounce them a certain way. If I were to make up a word for you off the top of my head, okay, let's take up a word like zart. Zart. I don't think that exists. Apologies if it does. And if I at least present this to a British audience and I spell it, I'm going to spell it Zart because the R has been involved in the sound of the A.
Yes.
The two goes together. If you take out the R, you get Zat. So it's a weird relationship which we learn these rules and the ways in which these letters are interacting with another with each other, and we can extend that to new words as well.
Whenever I hear people saying things like, "Oh, we should take out the GH," I hear all the Scots have entered the chat. Just going, hang on a
Yeah,
minute.
hang on,
Wait a
we
second.
still we were still using that.
From my cold dead hands.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. So in Scottish English and Scots, yeah, nicked.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Actually, we
yeah.
wanted to ask you the question of, since we had mentioned the ch or the yoch,
Mm.
where did the missing letters go? Because we used to have thorn, eth, wyn, yoch, uh, evil ash, right? And obviously
Mm.
ampersand as well. Where did they all go? And why did we get rid of
Mm-hmm.
them? Was it really just a printing press, or was there some other explanation?
Yeah, I think I need to. I need you to dig into why Ash is evil. I think that's it's quite a useful letter, to
Yeah,
be honest.
what's wrong? Yeah, what's wrong with it? I don't find anything.
It wears its usage on its sleeve because it's kind of halfway between an R and an S, so it looks like a combination of the two. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get that a lot of the time with English, so that's nice. Where did these letters go? They fell by the wayside as society changed. These letters are very much bound up with the Old English period and when they're in kind of full circulation. They're not universal. You can find Old English spellings with like th instead of the single letter thorn, and they're brought in during this period. People, have access to runic writing, and they say, "Great, we'll just take words from runes," which I think you can say a lot about that. I think that the fact that they felt able to do that, able to add letters to the Roman alphabet, I think reflects their sort of self-identity as people kind of outside the Roman Empire, like non-Romans, like Roman lovers, Roman respecters, but not Romans, and therefore we can kind of add things to their alphabet. I think there's, you can read more into this than just sounds. Um, so things like this endure over the subsequent period that linguistically we know as the Middle English, and they do fall by the wayside because they are crucially they're not continental. People are writing in a much more French style after the Battle of Hastings, and things like ash falls by the wayside very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's all just subsumed into A. Thorn endures for a long time, and increasingly it's kind of as a it starts looking like a Y, like a letter Y, which, as you'll know, it's that great kind of fun fact. That's the origin of ye olde. It's the oldie. It's just the word the originally. But really, I would say the death knell in that, the thing that really consigns these things to like the past or archaisms, it is the printing press. The printing press. You don't have blocks. You don't have the movable print or the movable type that you've brought over from the Low Countries. It didn't come with a thorn. It came with a Y. You can use that, but that's not it. What it definitely came with was a TH. So there are absolutely these biases which meant that these letters kind of fall by the wayside. A few of them at the beginning of the Middle English period, and others at the end.
Speaking of the printing press, who invented upper and lowercase? Like I can hear all the Germans in the chat going, ah.
Yeah.
Who
Who
invented
in,
upper and lowercase?
that's the tricky thing about talking about inventions. Who invented them? I suppose strictly speaking, it's the Romans. In that it's in Roman handwriting that the separation starts to take off. Using the capital letters, which are the ancient ones, using them according to different context, different environments. who are you writing to, what are you writing on. A kind of cursive emerges that simplifies the letters to make them easier to write or quicker to write, reducing their complexity, and this will become what we think of as lowercase.
Mm.
um, I think the important fact is that the capital letters, or knowledge of the capital letters, never goes anywhere. It sticks around throughout the Middle Ages until a kind of system for using the two establishes itself towards the end of the early medieval period, the beginning of the high Middle Ages, whenever that was. Basically, the two start to be used side by side. That's the crucial thing. If we were speaking, like, thinking of them as cases, that's printers. So that's 15th century, because they come in boxes, and you want to keep your movable print, your movable type separate. So you put them into separate cases. There you go.
Another myth that we would like to clear up, perhaps, is
Okay.
about the J. And so you didn't
Mm.
mention it much in your book, but did Gian Giorgio Trissano invent the J in 1524?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
Because that's what he claims.
yeah. Big one. That's a big one. I think he can be partially credited by this. I think there are moments of linguistic insight that can be attached to specific individuals. And with letters, every letter has many different facets. So it's not every letter is a kind of package of what does it stand for, what does it look like, what direction do you write it in, upper and lower case, that sort of thing. He can't really be credited with creating the shape of the letter J. That is in circulation from Roman cursive onwards, especially a kind of minuscule version that hangs below the line. I think that's an early medieval thing, and you can find examples of that. To begin with, it's just an I. It is
Hmm.
simply a variant of I that you might write at the beginning of a word, that you might write at the end of a series of I's, like if you were numbering things in Roman numerals. That's super common in like medieval handwriting to see like I, J. They mean like four, or like X, or four, I guess, would be IV. I, or I, J for three. Like that's very common to see that. So his insight or his moment of creation is not creating the letter that's already in circulation. His moment is recognizing that we could put this to a specific phonetic purpose. In that, because of the development of these languages, like his native Italian, out of Latin, you have like the vowel e and the consonant y, which are kind of like two sides of the same coin. They're very similar sounds phonetically speaking, but the consonant diverges and diverges and diverges until you end up with like a kind of j sound in medieval French and medieval Italian. In Spanish, it goes on its own journey as well. I think it goes from goes to je and then
Yeah,
sh,
isho,
and now it's like
isho.
and now ch, and then ch. That's retreated in the mouth because you have things like Javier. So that's something of a modern Spanish that's kind of gone back in the mouth. Um, and he's recognized that the vowel and the consonant have diverged so much that ideally they would have their own letter. We can't spell them with just I and kind of expect to get away with it by this point in time. And he, rather than coin a completely new letter, he say, well, we have this variant version of I. Let's use this as the consonant, and that's J.
Why is Y and
Huh.
not Y? I always learned it's because it has something to do with it's a borrowing either from Gothic wynn or yoch, but why is Y
Yeah.
WYE?
I had to really dig to find information about this. It, despite being this very aberrant letter name, like it doesn't fit. There's nothing else quite like it in the alphabet. There wasn't much information about it. I don't think it's win. So I don't think it's like a shortened version of win for a couple of reasons. Basically, because that's the wrong sound, and also because we need to drop the n and we need a long vowel. We need win to become we, and then from we via the great vowel shift we'd get y. So it's probably not win. It so what the name probably is a very early approximation of its Greek sound. So in
Hmm.
Greek today, because of a big kind of Greek sound change, it stands for the sound E. That's a later development. In at least, let's say, classical Athens, so in the time of Socrates and Plato, it probably stands for U. the front vowel U that people may know from French or German, right? It's a very common sound,
Hmm.
very unstable sound, keeps changing over and over again down the languages. And the threads are really hard to kind of connect up, but we have this mention, this completely fortuitous mention the uh, from the early medieval period. I think it's Gregory of Tours who's writing his chronicle,
Oh, my good
and
old
he just says,
buddy.
yeah, yeah, yes, Frankie is best gossip monger. Yeah, he
Yeah.
he he he's doing his thing, and he makes this complete offhand remark about this king who kind of wanted more letters, and he recommended that people should use them, and he uses the name we. I don't think it's
Mm.
clear. I can't remember the exact quote. I don't know if he actually gives the shape of the letter. He just gives the name, which is very helpful. But this looks like basically later people, scholars and scribes in the medieval west of Europe, encountering the Greek letter upsilon, hearing that it did or still does stand for U, and approximating it. They're approximating that sound. So it's not we, it's more like ui, ui. And
Okay.
this, it's really not clear how we then get from that to the English use of that name, but it's a hugely kind of important milestone on that name's journey that gets us to why. Because with ui, if that's what they intended for, for it to be pronounced like, we can then, centuries later, in English, apply the great vowel shift and we get why. But this is a kind of very fraying thread of a theory
In the same idea, why W and not W?
because it predates the final separation of U from V. So there's diversity in the name.
I
That's
I
it. Some
go
of the yeah.
I go through this with my students all the time because if I teach them, they're coming from French and I speak French, and they go, "Oh yeah, that W," and I go, "Nope, W," and they go,
Hmm.
"What?" Immediately, they just get so
Yeah.
upset. So that
They'll
and like
draw a low.
or when
Yeah.
I where I'm helping them to spell and I go, "Okay, E," and then they write an I and I go, "Nope, other E," and
Yeah. Yeah. That's a bad one. The Great Vowel Shift has a lot to answer for. It's responsible for that as well. Yeah, that's it's fair enough. The confusion is not completely understandable. This is a letter that I think I very grandiosely call it in my book. I call it a child of the fall of Rome, because basically it's invented. It's invented to spell the sound w, which post classical Rome
Mhm.
there's no letter for in the alphabetical system. But you have all these barbarians coming in with their awful names. Someone like Odoacer and these Visigoths, for example. We need to be able to spell the w sound, and it takes off after then. I think. Trying to remember where we get the earliest ones. I think we have some from Francia, but I think a lot of the earliest examples come from England, from the Old English period. Um, and why is why the variation in the name? Because as I said, it predates the separation from U between U and V. It's a very gradual separation. Arguably, it's not complete by either by at least the 18th century. You look at Dr. Johnson's dictionary, 1755.
My boy.
He actually, yeah, I get it. One of my personal heroes. I know we shouldn't have historical heroes, but the more I learn about him, the more I'm like, this is a sound man. Like this is it's just so many correct opinions. Loves languages. He gives to the
I
poor.
love that. A man of correct opinions.
He has so many correct opinions. What can I say? He's not a fan of the United States. He spends all this time working on language. He's extremely funny. He's very charitable.
And so
And he's very
memeable.
witty.
So memeable.
So amenable. That incredible,
Yeah,
kind of incredible
fantastic.
face.
Amazing.
Yeah, that that's not a snapshot. That's not a candid. He posed for that.
That's right.
He's quite happy to be looking like that forever. I would hate that if somebody took that portrait of me and 200 plus years later some guy writes a book and includes bits about you and that's the picture he
Oh
uses
no,
to
that's the best
illustrate you with.
picture. That's the best picture.
I'd rather not. I don't have I don't have Dr. Johnson's laissez-faire attitude to publicity, I
You need
think.
his wig. That's
Um,
what you need.
yeah, well, they'll come back into fashion, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, he's just sort of one of my kind of personal heroes. He's the sort of person that I think I would have I've been honored to have met him, but he probably would have said something absolutely scathing about me that would have made me love him
Such an
more
honor,
even
though,
than
to be insulted by
such an
Dr.
honor.
Johnson.
Oh, he's just all of these. What was his thing? There's so many kind of quips he does. Like, there's idealism that comes from Bishop Berkeley, the idea that like nothing's real, it's all in our brains. And Dr. Johnson kicks a stone and says, "I refute it thus," and says no more. Or like someone is talking about like how motion doesn't really exist, and he just gets up and leaves. It's just little things like that. Sorry, I'm so happy to talk about Dr. Johnson any time of
A
the
man
day.
of correct opinions. That's
A
so
man
good.
of correct opinions. There's not many people I can say that about. A man who knew that deep down knew that his opinions weren't correct, but was quite happy to fling them about as such, because he was a very humble man, I think, deep down. Anyway, how did we get on to Dr. Johnson? I write about him a lot. Yeah,
Yes. He is
yeah,
always a correct person to talk about.
yeah.
Somebody was
Oh
asking
yeah.
actually about the schwa and
Okay.
why we don't have it since it is a sound that we use all the time in our
Yeah.
language. Obviously, it's an approximate of sounds because not everybody uses the schwa and in the same
Mm.
place in their dialects. But why is it that we have a representation of a schwa and yet we won't recognize it in the alphabet?
That is a great question. It's one of those moments that's so satisfying for me in my job, to make people aware of this sound. I think it's the kind of whatever your version of schwa is. Schwa, for context, is kind of the catch-all term for that unstressed vowel, the
Uh,
central vowel that you'll It's kind of
uh.
It's the sound of modern English. It's so common. It's the thing that defines modern English. It's the thing that trips people up about sounding English, because schwa is not. I mean, I would hope and I trust in modern language teachers that they equip their students for this. But even if L2 learners of English know about schwa, they may not be able to replicate it because their language may not have it. It's the reason why Czechs, so Czech people where I live, will sound Czech. They'll sound foreign because Czech has no schwa sound. So that they won't say doctor, there it is. They'll either upgrade it to a full vowel, doctor, or they'll turn it into some sort of syllabic R. So they'll say doctor, which neither is English. Both are very Czech. It is the sound I think that defines modern English. It's so common, like every other word. In fact, it is a word on its own because the indefinite article most of the time is not a or an. It's just a. You
Uh,
know, I read a book. I read a book. I read a book. So common. But if schwa is around over early periods of English history, it's just not around enough to make it into spelling. There seems to be, we don't have recordings of this, but we can basically kind of say, or in a kind of, well, I hope it's not circular reasoning, but we can kind of say, based off spelling itself, that if it had been around, if it had been a prominent feature of English, we would see it in spelling. A letter would have been created, or a letter would have been dedicated to spell schwa. Maybe not in all words, but in some words. It wasn't. So it's not common enough to make it into the standard that emerges in the 15th century. And I would say that actually it increases, it increases. And I think that you can still find hints of a kind of earlier stage of English that has less schwa in it. I mean, you can hear like actors with this great diction. I don't think this is some sort of like affectatious pronunciation. I think this is actually a hangover from I can't prove this, but like it's a hangover from earlier stage of English with less schwa in it, where it really is actor. It's not actor, right? Uh, it doesn't make the cut. It's not around enough in the spoken language to make it into the alphabet, and therefore, to this day, it's absent from spelling, despite being arguably the most common English sound.
and so with that, if you
Mhm.
could change the alphabet in one way, do not say get rid of Q. Do you change the alphabet in some way? Danny goes on at great length about how much he absolutely despises the Q, but we need it. We need it. It's so
Yeah.
important because that's that option. So, because and as you rightly point out, it makes a very important distinction between check and paycheck, which is the
Yeah.
one of the great at least here one of the great distinctions between Canadian English and American English. And so therefore we will not give up our Q. Sir, thank you. So if you could if you could change the alphabet in some way, don't
Yeah.
say getting rid of Q. What would you do?
This is a fascinating thing because I have to be so aware of all the relevant factors when discussing spelling, despite not sharing this the importance of check with a QUE at the end. I begrudgingly, to be a good scholar, I have to admit that's a use for the language.
Mm-hmm.
That's a use for the letter. That is a reason for keeping it around.
Mm-hmm.
There is no kind of you know preserve or area where it's like this is good uses of the alphabet and this is not. I have to include all of these things when thinking about how we use these letters. I will use this one in future. I think it's a great example. The one I've reached for in the past is like spelling bees. If we
Ah,
reform spelling, we get rid of things like Q, spelling bees would probably stop functioning because they'd be so boring. Everybody would know how to spell instantaneously, and crucially, certain people who host spelling bees might be out of a job. So this is a genuine thing that I have to bear in mind that there is no kind of right or wrong uses for the letters. They're all uses and therefore all valid. I digress. Also, well, okay, I'm going to digress further. Um, I don't think I'm that mean about the letter Q in the book. Like, if I may quote myself,
it's a very long chapter of hatred.
yes, uh, I don't think it's like a polemic or anything like this. Okay, chapter Q. Presumably it's after chapter P. Here we are. Yeah. Okay. So at the beginning, I say yes. The English alphabet's greatest absurdity and insult to efficiency and common sense. I stand by that.
At least
Um,
that's only marginally better. What you said about the M, sir. How dare you?
oh, dull and dutiful, which it is. Okay,
But
at the very
dull,
end of the
dull.
chapter, yeah,
Hmm.
at the very end of the chapter, Q is an unexpected survivor in the alphabet's long journey to the present day. For that, at least, it deserves our admiration. There you go.
At
So,
least our
no, I'm not all
admiration,
mean.
but so Q
We're
wouldn't be
back.
kicked out after all.
No, no. Do you know what? I don't. I hope this isn't a cop out. I would introduce schwa. I'd introduce it. I think it would help a lot of people. I think it would be a small change that would have a big difference, or like a big consequence. Like it would bring so much of English spelling closer to pronunciation. I'm in favor of
But the
it. I think,
question is, whose pronunciation? Because whenever I get asked this
mm,
question, they're like, oh, how would you reform spelling? And I actually say, no, I wouldn't. Because even
hmm
though English spelling is not easy, it makes sense when you think about how many Englishes or Anglics there are, right? If you
hmm
think about the words good and food, in my
hmm
accent, they don't rhyme. However, in many Scottish accents, they do. So who is right and who is wrong? The answer is neither of us or both of us.
hmm
I can't reform that. If it actually rhymes in their accent, I'm taking it away from them. Why would I do that? So the question is as well, so since schwa is for unstressed vowels, what about accents that stress those vowels?
Yeah, very fair. Very fair. Yeah, yeah. This is the ultimate thing. Like, how are you going to reform, and whose English is it going to be based on? It's the question that, for the time being, I think is unanswerable. I think that if we actually, reform spelling, and we really did it along kind of phonological, phonemic lines, it would have to be at least nationally done, if not sub-nationally, because of course people within countries all don't speak the same. Very
No.
undemocratic process. The day that happens, I think the English language disintegrates as a concept, as a reality. Basically, our speech has diverged so much, so you divide up standard orthography and send it down at least national lines. We're not dealing with the unified language anymore. We're dealing with the same thing that happened to Latin, basically. So yeah, it's a very tricky thing. It means that I'm not keen to make big changes. Um, and it would not be wholly straightforward to just introduce schwa. Firstly, because there are other unstressed vowels. There are people love schwa, but there's no love for shui, which is the version that you hear in roses. That's the one. Contrast with roses as something belonging to Rosa, one of those
Right.
rare kind of examples where you can contrast the two. So roses, roses. That sounds different in my English at least. And yeah, some accents like mine keep those two non-stressed vowels separate. Some merge them. I think Australian English might merge them, or at least some kinds of Australian English. I suppose it's just one of the few recommendations that I could make in good faith, and just say I could make this in good faith and say this would help a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot.
I'm waiting for you to be like, but I'd still get rid of Q.
I wasn't allowed to say that, so
No, you can if you want to, but then, how would you spell the words that it absolutely needs? How would you spell Arabic approximants? You need that Q sound. So
mm,
just to show again,
I like that.
at least even to show origin, if not to have a very big sound change in general.
Mm,
Danny, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and for being here. This is an absolute treat. Thank you so much. And the book is smashing. Everybody, please go out and
thank you
buy
very
Why
much.
Q Needs You. And Q does need you, but it needs us too. And that's the point.
Hmm.
Is that I feel like everything just goes back to that A Bit of Fry and Laurie sketch where it's going, our language, Tiger. Hello, we're talking about language. It's, and
What
it's,
a quote!
and
What a quote! Yep.
it's true. I think it does. To the point
That's
that we
yeah.
we could say these random words together, and they've never been uttered this way before. Was it for friendly? Hold my nose, squarely waiter, or friendly milk will come to mend my trousers. Exactly. That, so that's exactly how I feel about your book and about language in general. Is that language
Hmm.
needs people to speak it, and
Yes.
language is changing, as you say in your book, as we all always say, language changes all the time. As many people who is want to scream and cry about new words and about new pronunciations, it is a living language, and living language has
Hmm.
to change, and that is just how it is. And I love how your book catalogs not only how our language has changed, but really how much our alphabet has both changed and also stayed the same, but yet
Mm.
accommodated for our language. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. And Danny, please write another one. I'm waiting for that other one that you had mentioned where you're talking about syntax. That's going to be the next one.
Hmm.
The
I know.
sexy syntax and other sailors. There
Sexy
you go.
sin. I think that comes under the category of when an author becomes famous enough to have a flop. I think that's a book that I reserve for some possible future where I'm okay financially for the time being.
Danny,
I'm
I,
so
I have to tell you, I've
yeah.
got the 36 books in, and I'm never going to be okay financially.
Great, that's great.
It's
Okay,
something to
well,
look forward to.
yeah, yeah, I come up with these ideas and I throw them at my agent and I just see the look in his eyes and being like, nope, nope, that's another one. But at the beginning of this year, I threw an idea at him, something that emerged in the writing of another pitch, and I saw the little dollar signs in his eyes, and I went, okay, we've got it, and that's what is happening in the background of my life at the moment. That's kind of rumbling on. It's all very delicate, the early stages of a book's conception, but hopefully I can get to writing quite soon.
Oh, well, start it right now, so this way we'll have you back on in 6 months.
Okay.